Hi, I'm Ryan Szymanski, curator for Battleship New Jersey Museum and Memorial. And today we're going to talk about USS Samuel B. Roberts and could what disabled her have done similar damage to Battleship New Jersey. This is part of our series of could what sank X ship have also sunk New Jersey, except in this case, Samuel B. Roberts survives when she really shouldn't have. On April 14th, 1988, the Oliver Hazard Perry-class frigate Samuel B. Roberts is sailing in the Persian Gulf. She's part of a U.S. Navy effort to protect neutral shipping in the Persian Gulf during the Iran-Iraq War. The war has been escalating for years at this point, and that eventually led to both Iranian and Iraqi aircraft, ships, and other non-discriminatory weapons targeting the neutral shipping in the Persian Gulf, particularly Kuwaiti oil tankers. Kuwait asks President Ronald Reagan for help, and Reagan says the US Navy cannot support foreign flag vessels, but if all the Kuwaiti tankers reflag as American vessels, then the US Navy can move in and convoy them. All of the Iowa-class battleships will see service in the Persian Gulf during this tanker war or the subsequent Persian Gulf War. In addition to them, there are a number of carriers and smaller ships better suited for the convoy escort role. In particular, Perry-class frigates like Samuel B. Roberts, designed specifically to escort convoys. Roberts is on her way to refuel after a convoy escort mission when a lookout spots 3 black objects in the water in front of them. They've sailed into a minefield. Her captain does exactly what you're supposed to do, and he slams on the brakes and throws the ship into reverse. Obviously, the path behind you is clear because you've sailed in this far safely. So if he can just back his ship out, there's no problem. Normally, these mines would be anchored to the sea floor so that they're floating just under the surface and able to catch ships that way unseen. However, these mines are floating, which is why the lookouts were able to see it, but also why one was able to drift under the hull of Samuel B. Roberts as she backs up. They're a simple weapon, just a 250-pound charge, but the 1/2-inch HY-80 steel that makes up the hull of Perry-class frigates could not stop an explosion like that. The mine managed to get completely under the midships part of the ship before one of the contact detonators initiated the explosion. And so the hole ripped open the bottom of the ship like a can opener, right in the main engineering space. It actually flooded 2 compartments, and there was so much water weight that the bulkhead between those 2 compartments and a 3rd compartment started to give way, causing the flooding to spread. The engineering spaces are some of the largest on any ship, and when that or multiple of them start to flood, it severely endangers the vessel. We're standing at one of Battleship New Jersey's 11 repair lockers, and we've also got a flight crash locker and damage control central to coordinate all of these. This is where a repair party would muster on Battleship New Jersey in order to get their equipment to go and fight whatever damage the ship has taken. This is not for making permanent repairs. It is simply to control the damage and limit its spread so that the ship can get out of the battle space and get permanent repairs in a port. On New Jersey, our repair locker doors tend to all have this black and yellow stripe. The equipment in the repair lockers differs based on where they are. So repair lockers inside the ship tend to have more equipment for fighting flooding, while repair lockers like this one up on 2nd deck forward, right around turret number 1's barbette, have a lot of firefighting equipment. We're not going to flood up here. If we do, we've got bigger issues, but it's very easy for shells to penetrate the 1.5-inch shell plating on this level and cause fires in here. while battleships are made without many flammable materials, this is a berthing compartment, and it's surrounded by other berthing compartments. So some of the possessions of sailors, the books that they have in their lockers, their uniforms, all of that burns. And so you see a lot of firefighting equipment. Samuel B. Roberts' crew and captain took to heart the words of General Patton when he said, "A pint of sweat in peacetime is worth a gallon of blood in wartime." Samuel B. Roberts was well known throughout the fleet at that time for her successful evaluations and damage control work during training prior to arriving in the Persian Gulf. She was one of the newer Oliver Hazard Perry class frigates, and she had gone through a large training and evaluation period before deploying. When the ship took damage, her crew immediately jumped into action. Having the main engineering space knocked out also caused the ship to lose power, but only for a minute. One of the auxiliary diesel generators was not flooded, although the full load of the ship's electrical being sent to it all at once caused it to trip offline. One of the younger members of the crew who worked in that space and was there on watch immediately jumped on top of the diesel generator and was able to restart it to get power back online. Thus, the ship was able to keep its weapons and radar and communication equipment online throughout the entire ordeal, so that Iran, Iraq, or other countries wouldn't see a disabled vessel as a target. More importantly, the damage control parties went to work. Some of them immediately went to work in the partially flooded space to try and stop the spread. Her internal bulkheads are mild steel and not particularly thin, probably only about a quarter inch, and so all the weight of the water in the two engineering spaces was causing them to split open. Sailors initially did what you're trained to do and took a plug, or also these come in wedge shapes, to try and hammer that into holes in the bulkhead. And there are large mauls which are issued along with these plugs as part of that. The wood, once it's hammered into a hole, will expand and pretty well stop the flow of water. However, when sailors tried to hammer these into the bulkhead, it caused the bulkhead to split further. They couldn't use hard patches. They needed to use something softer. So the call went up to empty the berthing spaces. And so mattresses, blankets, and clothing was passed down into the flooding space to just cover holes. It wasn't entirely preventing the water to get through, but it was slowing it down so that the pumps could keep up with the amount of water. And now that the ship had power again, the pumps could function. It took 8 hours to control the flooding, but the crew was finally able to get the space patched up to the point that their pumps could keep up with it. The bigger problem with the flooding wasn't from the hole in the bottom of the ship, though. It was from the fires that had been started, which damage control parties also initially started to fight. On the bridge, the ship's commanding officer realized that the ship was starting to sink lower in the water than she should, with 2 or 3 engineering main spaces flooded out, and instantly realized it was all the firefighting fluids that were being put into those spaces. So he ordered the repair parties to stop fighting the fires and thus let them burn unattended, but allow the flooding to get under control. That was the more dangerous thing to the ship. And so while they fought the flooding, the fires went on uncontested, and it was much later that night before they were able to get to that. In the end, Samuel B. Roberts was repaired enough that she was able to make it back to port, and from there, additional temporary patches were able to be put on the hull. Her keel was broken, and her engine room was completely flooded. So the entire ship was put on top of a heavy sea lift vessel and sailed back to the United States, escorted by one of her sister ships. Once there, the shipyard cut out the entire engineering space and dropped it out of the bottom of the vessel and scrapped it. They brought in a whole new engineering module and jacked it up into place in the shipyard and welded it there so that the ship could continue her service life. Samuel B. Roberts continued her life as a commissioned frigate until 2015, and despite efforts to preserve her as a museum ship, she was heavily stripped by other active ships and is currently sitting in the Philadelphia Navy Yard awaiting final disposal. She will likely either be sunk in a SINK-X testing weapons, or she will be sunk, or she will be cut up for scrap metal. Battleship New Jersey earlier this year was allowed to go on board her and some of her sister ships to strip parts for restoring this vessel. In particular, some of her damage control equipment now sits on our tour route in what had been empty racks. So her legacy continues on Battleship New Jersey and the other museum ships that were allowed to strip parts off of her. If you're interested in that strip trip, there's a link in the description to the video we took. However, you'll see we don't have any footage of the inside of the ship. We are not allowed to record the inside of these vessels while we're stripping parts off of. That's part of our agreement with the Navy when we're allowed to do this. I would have loved to have shot a video on or inside Samuel B. Roberts. I would have loved to have shot footage of the stuff we were stripping there, but it's not allowed, and we're trying to be good partners with Big Navy. So, could Battleship New Jersey have survived a similar hit? The short answer is absolutely yes. Battleship New Jersey has a triple bottom, where Samuel B. Roberts does not. Check the video in the description below where we talk about the ship's triple bottom. That is designed to defeat underwater explosions like what hit Samuel B. Roberts. And likely the depth of the mine, Samuel B. Roberts has probably a third of the draft of Battleship New Jersey, so likely that mine would have hit on the side of New Jersey where our torpedo defense is strongest. Yes, an Iowa-class battleship would have been damaged by a mine hit, but no, it wouldn't have been anywhere near as severe as or life-threatening as Samuel B. Roberts. But let's assume it is. Let's say you blow a hole in between two of the engineering main spaces and a third one is flooding. Again, Battleship New Jersey has significantly more in the way of a propulsion plant, while Samuel B. Roberts has her turbines in a single space feeding a single propeller, and one hit can knock out the whole plant. Battleship New Jersey has 4 separate fire rooms and 4 separate engine rooms. So assuming any fire room and engine room combination, because they alternate, is flooded out, we still have more than enough reserve buoyancy to keep the ship afloat, and we still have 3 identical spaces all cross-connected that can continue to power the ship both propulsively and electrically, so we can pump those spaces out. Iowa-class battleships are exceptionally vulnerable to mines. They've got no defense against them. They were designed with a paravane system that could be used to sweep mines, but a battleship is a hellaciously expensive minesweeper. Plus, those paravanes are designed to catch moored mines and cause them to break free of their mooring and float to the surface, where you can shoot them and cause them to explode, or send out underwater divers to place charges on them and blow them up. During the Persian Gulf War, Missouri did carry demolition teams to destroy these mines. Wisconsin, however, did not. Offered the opportunity, her captain said, a battleship is a hellaciously expensive minesweeper, put these guys on a frigate instead. New Jersey, during this time period when she was in the Persian Gulf, a year after Samuel B. Roberts had been hit, did not carry any minesweeping gear. The forward casting at the base of the stem, where the paravanes were supposed to connect, had corroded very badly and was replaced at the Long Beach Naval Shipyard. It was just cut off because the shipyard didn't think the ships would be used as minesweepers. Well, then the battleships start getting sent to the Persian Gulf, so the later battleships retained their equipment despite the dissimilar metal corrosion and continued to be used as, continued to have the ability to sweep mines. I'm not sure if any of them ever attempted to. The other 3 Iowas, because of their dissimilar metal corrosion, had impressed current cathodic protection systems installed, but New Jersey never did. Another one of the many changes between these ships. So that's a short answer for a long story. Just for the heck of it, Could New Jersey have survived what sunk the other two Samuel B. Roberts? There have been three of them. The Perry-class frigate was the third. The second one was a Gearing-class destroyer boat built after World War II. This ship served up until 1970 and then was sunk in a sync-ax, specifically by a squadron of A-6 intruders dropping bombs on her. Battleships have traditionally been expended in sink exercises, and aircraft bombs have traditionally sunk battleships. So certainly an Iowa-class battleship could survive the hits that the destroyer Samuel B. Roberts took, but the sync-ax is all about sinking the ship. You will sink it at the end of the day. So those A6s would have come back and dropped enough bombs to sink her. The original Samuel B. Roberts, as many of you know, was sunk during the Battle of Samar as part of the Leyte Gulf battle. New Jersey was thought to be there by American commanders to protect San Bernardino Strait from the Japanese fleet that ambushed Samuel B. Roberts and Taffy 3. However, she was not present at the time. Halsey, using her as his flagship, had continued to take her north with the carriers so that she missed the fight that she was designed to have. Now, it's a whole nother story if Third Fleet was still in San Bernardino Strait when Yamato tries to emerge with the Japanese center force. If you'd like to hear my thoughts on that, leave a comment down below and maybe we'll do a video about it in the future. However, if New Jersey alone was there in place of the destroyer escort Samuel B. Roberts, which is a huge waste of resources, I actually believe she would have done worse than the destroyer escort. The Japanese fire control was set up to shoot at enemy battleships, and they misidentified the American destroyers as battleships and cruisers. They thought they were fighting the main fleet. If they had have actually been facing a single battleship, in addition to the handful of destroyers and escort carriers, they could have very easily concentrated their fire. They would have scored significantly more hits and destroyed the vessel very quickly. New Jersey may be the equal of any Japanese battleship. However, 4 or 5 Japanese battleships and their heavy cruisers armed with devastating long-lance torpedoes could easily chew a lone battleship up. Furthermore, Samuel B. Roberts survived major caliber shell hits that did hit her because they were armor piercing, and her thin hull could not set them off. Battleship New Jersey would set off those shells and would take terrible damage in this lone engagement. So, what's a future Would Battleship New Jersey Survive X video you would like to see? Let us know in the comment section down below. If you would like to see something about Third Fleet Fighting Center Force off Leyte Gulf, let us know. I'll give you my speculations in a future video. Battleship New Jersey receives operating support from the New Jersey Department of State and also from a number of viewers and private businesses. In particular, the support you guys have given our YouTube channel has really helped the museum survive the pandemic. We appreciate it, and if you'd like to continue supporting, there's a link in the description below. You can also support us by liking, sharing, and subscribing so more people find out about our channel and our museum. Thanks for watching.